Do we have action? Do we have action? I think we might have. Are we on?
You are on.
Here we go. Good evening, fellow Quarantinians and music lovers. Episode 2 of the Quarantini Happy Hour. Thank you very much for all the comments you sent in and questions, and thank you, of course, for all the donations. Very kind. One question that came up quite a few times was, what's in a quarantini? I asked She Who Must Be Obeyed, and she said I could tell you all, but then she'd have to kill me. So, anyway, so of course, plan B, I invented my own one, and to be quite honest with you, I've invented a brand new quarantini, especially for tonight. This one is my own invention, and doesn't require all that messing about. I'm going to use crushed ice and 1 part vermouth to 3 parts this and 3 parts that. This one is basically, it's got a new name. It's a quarantinus. Let me just have a sip here. Wow, it's gorgeous. It's very easy to make. It's basically, hold on, let me just top it up. Bottle of Guinness. And bottle of Guinness in a martini glass with a wedge of potato. The quarantinus. So, hold on, let me have another little quick sip just before I get started. Oh, it's wonderful. A nice alternative to the lemon martini. So, once again, if anybody's listening, if anybody's watching, if you haven't all turned off by this point, please send in any questions you might have, because the thing here really is to talk about and illustrate music, especially New Orleans music, as it pertains to the piano. Piano is the instrument of choice here this evening. So I'll get started. I'll just play you a little something. I'll make something up, something New Orleans-y, to give you a little taste of the vibe, all right? Major 7th chord, a martini chord for you. So, She Who Must Be Obeyed is manning the controlling, and as per popular request, she's actually got a microphone.
Yep, I've got a microphone now.
All right, so got any
can
questions coming
hear
in?
The dulcet tones of my Long Island accent. They go so fast. Okay, here's one from somebody named Andrew Hart, who says, I've read in a few places, where'd it go? I've read in a few places that John at one point collaborated with D'Angelo. What did they work on, and how did they meet?
Good question. D'Angelo is one of my favorites. And so I first heard about D'Angelo. My friend Paddy sent me a cassette from England. said, you should check this out. And this was when D'Angelo's first record came out, Brown Sugar. And I had a cassette with no information, and I was actually traveling through Brazil, on a long bus journey in Brazil. I'd finished a gig and was doing some traveling, and at night, on like a 20-hour bus drive through Brazil with headphones on, I thought, man, this guy is incredible. Quite a while later, maybe a year after that, I was visiting John Porter, the record producer in Los Angeles, who helps me make all my records, produces my albums. And he said, you never guess what, I just got hired to make a B.B. King album of duets. And I'm making a list of all the people I'd like to have duet with B.B. King. And I said, oh man, I'd tell you there's one guy that would be incredible, D'Angelo. And he said, well, I think the record company only want, they're going for big names like Carlos Santana and Van Morrison and people like that, Rolling Stones. But so I said, well, you should check him out anyway. This guy's amazing. But I didn't really know anything about him. I wasn't even sure if it was him just singing or playing. I figured he had to be the same guy playing and singing because of the way the phrasing from the voice and the keyboards work together. Anyway, a while later, I actually got hired to play on the record, and we were in New York with this killer band, with Steve Jordan and Pino Palladino on bass, and Hugh McCracken on guitar. And I arrived at the studio. I was the first one there, and then John showed up. He said, "Oh, you never guess who's coming in?" I said, "Who?" He said, "D'Angelo." I said, "Whoa!" And then D'Angelo walks in the room. It's just me and him, and I'm sitting at the B3, and he sat at the piano, and he was a really nice guy. He was quite shy. We got chatting about, and Thelonious Monk came up, and he said, "Man, oh yeah," he said, "I just got hip to Thelonious Monk." He said, "This is my favorite. Do you know this one?" And he starts playing all this Monk stuff. So I knew that he had to be a brilliant musician just from this record and hearing just the phrasing, and it was really killer, really killer. And so we ended up playing on this B.B. King tune, on this duet called "Nobody Home," and that was the session where D'Angelo met Pino, the bass player. And I think during the session, his bass player called up to say he couldn't make a gig, and he asked Pino if he was available, and then the rest of it is history. So Pino ended up getting the gig, and then became the number one go-to guy with all the R&B records. Still is. So yeah, so that's how I met D'Angelo on a B.B. King record in New York. Good question.
All right, and then Ted Lambros says, how about some Fats-style Nola triplets?
Fats-style Nola triplets. Okay, well, the interesting thing about the Fats Domino triplet sound, everyone associates this with Fats Domino, the most famous one being this one. Everybody knows Blueberry Hill. Well, for the non-musicians who are wondering what on earth is a triplet is 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. Triplets in the right hand, and then this bass pattern that goes like this. So interesting, that last little riff I played is not Fats Domino. Fats Domino, that's the sound everybody associates with Fats. But the truth is that before Fats Domino, there was Smiley Lewis. And Smiley Lewis was a singer that had this big, big, big voice. It was a bit like Wynonie Harris, or one of the Blues Shouters. Joe Turner, one of those guys. So Smiley could sing without a microphone in front of a big band and still be heard. And Smiley Lewis was a big cat. And Dave Bartholomew, who recently passed away at the age of 100, sadly, was Dave Bartholomew was the guy that could organize a studio session, choose the musicians, get the song in shape. He'd know who to call, and the record companies could trust him to emerge from a recording session with a record, and it would be a good record. And with Smiley, they developed this sound. That was the triplet piano sound. Sadly, they didn't have any big success. They made great records, and other people covered his songs. I guess the most well-known one was a tune that he had called One Night of Sin. One night of sin is what I'm now paying for. That was the lyric. And it was a regional hit, but Elvis Presley heard it and changed the name to One Night with You. That's what I'm now praying for. And that was more acceptable at the time. And he had a huge hit with it. Smiley died in poverty in the 1960s. They tried and tried to have a big hit with Smiley and never could quite crack it, although the records are great. So they tried another tack on the same record label, the Imperial record label, same studio, Cosmos recording studio, the same band with Frank Fields and Lee Allen and Red Tyler and Earl Palmer, Dave Bartholomew producing, and even the same songs in the same key. They cut them with Fats Domino, who was a younger cat, probably better, looked more photogenic. And he went on to become the most successful, best paid artist that ever came out of New Orleans, pretty much. I guess with the exception of Louis Armstrong, I don't know. So that's the story behind it. So the triplets are really Smiley Lewis. That's the Smiley Lewis sound. And it wasn't just limited to Smiley. They had all kinds of records that were cut here in New Orleans. They felt the triplet feel. And you can apply the triplet feel to a bunch of different things, but this song, the Junkers Blues, keeps coming up. But you can play it in a triplet feel, and it goes, you do it something like this. Well, they call me a junker, 'cause I don't stay loaded all the time. We're getting high on the reefer, drinking that mellow berry wine. Give me whiskey when I'm frisky. Yeah, give me cocaine when I'm feeling dry. Give me tobacco when I'm sickly, Lord, and give me heroin before I die. So the triplet is another way of playing a shuffle, but in other places they might go. And they kind of did do that in New Orleans, but they actually felt this beat. In New Orleans, everyone that's familiar with New Orleans knows we've got this Caribbean history. And when you play that triplet thing, it's very easy to go from... Now let's check out the left hand. Boom, bow, doo, 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 doo. There's only a slight switch to go. Boom, boom, boom. Now you're in the world of... That's a Caribbean sound. We call that rumba. Don't slam that door. I ain't gonna tell you no more. Can't remember the words, but I used to play that song with Snooksy. Cut it at Cosmos Studio with the same band, same musicians. So, triplets. Fats Domino, Smiley Lewis. And interesting, that was a style that became hugely popular, not just in New Orleans, but all through southwest Louisiana. So much that the Cajuns embraced it and had a whole bunch of hits. And it got given another name, which was Swamp Pop. So then you had bands like Jiving Gene and the Jokers, Well, now, let me find a better key for it. Hold on. Breaking up is hard to do. Breaking up is sad and blue. Breaking up is the thing to do. it's true, like I told you once before. There's fussing and fighting, there'll be no more. I love that song. That's that song I used to hear every Christmas at our family get-togethers. That was always one that was played on a 45 that Uncle John brought back from New Orleans. Professor Longhair used it too, you know. Well, now, let me find a better key. Every day and every night, yeah, I wait for you right. Every day and every night, girl, I wait for you to ride. Since you've been gone, you know I'm all alone. So there you go, triplets. What other?
All right. So
what other questions have come in?
Kim Abear says,
Hey
talk
Kim, how you doing, bro?
she's Kim, I guess.
I think that's Kim maybe from Lafayette.
Oh, okay. Talk a little bit about your take on Art Neville and drop in some of I Get the Blues When It Rains.
Art Neville, okay. Well, Art Neville was better known as a B3 player, but he did play piano on some of his early records. And actually, if you want an example of Art Neville really killing it on the piano, getting down, there's an obscure record by a guy called Jerry Byrne. The song was written by Mac Rebennack, and it's called Lights Out. And if you listen to it, I always thought it was Mac Rebennack playing the piano on it. And I don't know, it's kind of an obscure tune, but he told me he still gets royalty. Wait, he told me back in the day that he was still getting royalty payments for it. Lights Out by Jerry Byrne. Jerry Byrne was a musician here in town. It was in the band with Mac Rebennack. But the piano player is Art Neville. Lights Out, if you check that out, it's incredible. So Art Neville, really nice cat. The guy that changed a lot of stuff up here in the funk world with the meters. And what was the end of the question? I get the blues when it ruins. Well, you know, I know this song from Snooks Eagling records that were around the house. My uncle's house, Uncle Bruce and Uncle John too. But I used to play this with Snooks, and it's an old tune. Actually, it's a song that goes back to the 1920s, and it has a lovely introduction that's been lost and forgotten. And I actually almost learned it the other day, but I can't remember how it goes right now. But anyway. Well, you know I get the blues when it rains. Yeah, you know the blues I can't lose now, all when it rains. Each little raindrop that fall down, baby, on my window pane remind me of tears I shed in vain now, baby. Well, you know I sit and pray for the sun, all to shine, yeah, back on me once again now. Rain now, baby, when I lost you. Yeah, it rained, child, when I found you, yeah. Oh, that's why I get the blues. Yeah, that's why I get the blues, yeah. Oh, that's why I get the blues, baby, when it rains. Baby, rain when I lost you, and now it rain, child, when I found you, yes. Well, now that's why I get the blues, oh baby, when it rains. Actually, I just cut that tune on a session last week with Johnny Vidakovich and James Singleton. Good tune. Hold on, I've just got to quickly reach over and have another drop of Quarantinus. Hold on. Oh, it's my new favourite cocktail. Let me just top it up. There you go, lovely. Okay, what's the next question?
That's an easier drink for me to make for you. I just had to cut the potato.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kathleen Cole Anderson says, "Can you tell us about the first time you met Dr. John?"
Okay. Well, the first time I met Dr. John was at a rehearsal at a bass player's house, Pete Scott's house in Brixton, in South London. Excuse me. I was back in England after having lived in New Orleans for a couple of years, and I had to leave the country for visa reasons. And I was in England, missing New Orleans hugely, and Dr. John was someone who hadn't been to England for a long time, and was just kind of like a legendary name that you saw on the back of record covers and record liner notes. And then one day in Time Out, it said, playing next week in London at the Half Moon in Putney, Dr. John. And they used a new local London band called Diz and the Doorman. Diz is a really good piano player, plays all that Professor Longy and Jack Dupree stuff. And I was a fan of that band, and Diz would very kindly let me sit in. I was just a kid. I was about 19 or 20 or something. And they were backing up. In the rhythm section, this band was Peter Scott and a drummer called Kieran O'Connor. Kieran was an absolute walking disaster zone, but he was a really nice guy, very hugely funny, dreadful alcoholic. But he could really, really play. He could really play. And so that was the band, and Matt came over, that was the backing band. And they did a couple of gigs, and then for some reason the guitar player couldn't do it, so they suggested me, and I got the gig playing guitar. And so I went down to this rehearsal. I took my guitar on the bus. I didn't have a car, so I took the bus to Brixton and carried my amp and the guitar all the way up Brixton Hill in the sun, blazing sun, and got there and carried up 4 flights of stairs. Was exhausted, and there's Dr. John. And I was kind of in awe, because he was one of my idol piano players. I loved the way he played. He was a larger-than-life character, and he was in a bit of a grumpy mood, because he was looking for his medication, if you know what I mean, and was jonesing a little bit. And so the rehearsal was kind of disorganized. There wasn't a piano, there were no instruments, it was just me and my guitar. And so he spent most of the time sitting by waiting for a phone call so he could get his stuff sorted out. And I just sat in the other room and just sat there and just started playing the guitar, and I was playing some funk, and he would occasionally come in and he'd kind of look down and then go out, and then he'd come back in and I was still playing. And then he came in and said, okay, well, let's talk through the set tonight. Look, I'm going to do this. And we passed the guitar back and forth, and he showed me what he was going to do on the guitar, and then we started talking about New Orleans. And he was surprised to find that I'd just come back from New Orleans and lived there for a couple of years. And so he was kind of curious. And being a piano player and a guitar player, myself, and him being a piano player and guitar player, I kind of knew what piano players wanted to hear from a guitar. And he kind of dug it. And then, so we did this gig, and the gig went great. And then the next day we were at a recording studio in London for the BBC World Service, and we did this session. And then everybody split, and it was just me and him. And he started playing a Little Willie John tune, and I said, oh, that was my favorite. And I said, you know this one? I played him a few bars on the piano. He said, oh, I didn't know you could play piano. And I said, so we started chatting, and I said, am I doing this right? And I played some Professor Long, some Tipatina. And he said, oh, man, all right. So tomorrow you play piano and I'll play guitar. I said, great. So we switched round. And And we became friends. I mean, the big thing, the bonding thing, was that we both. I had loved Little Willie John at that time, and I'd been wearing out this Little Willie John's greatest hits record, and he loved Little Willie John. I was surprised that I even knew who Willie John was, and yeah, that was it. That's the first time I met him, and I played with him on several occasions, and was in his band a few years ago for the last record he made. Yeah, sadly missed. Dr. Mac Rebenak, good cat.
Ready?
Yeah, next question.
So Mark Membria says, "What's that Duesenberg behind you?"
This is my Duesenberg. Oh, I like this guitar.
Oh, and then along with that, and I wrote so fast, I'm sorry if I get your last name wrong, but Christian Sayeg wants to hear Skin in the Game.
Okay.
No? Oh. Or just a little bit of it.
Yeah, I'll play a little bit of it.
Because I want to hear it too.
I was playing this. The guitar is called a Duesenberg. It's a German guitar. And I was. The reason I have this guitar is because I went to Australia to do a tour and had a bunch of stuff to actually carry, and didn't want to risk taking the guitar in a soft case and then having them make me put it in the hole. So I said to the promoter, "Can you borrow a guitar for me?" And he borrowed this guitar, Duesenberg, which I thought was great. And I borrowed it for some gigs in Sydney, and I borrowed it for some gigs in Melbourne. And then I couldn't bear to be parted from it, so I ended up buying it. So that's the story. I got it a German guitar that I bought in Australia. Tripped and fell in too deep. Might have made some promises I can't keep. That's just me, I'm just saying. I got skin in the game. Might have made some bad rhymes. Some good times. Woo. It's me, I'm just saying. I got skin in the game. Goes like that. I'm playing that for Uncle John if he's watching this in England. That's one of my Uncle John's licks. Killer. I don't know anybody else that would ever come up with something like that. When I was a little kid, learning how to play, I'd go and stay at my grandma's house, and John had just come back from Ireland. He'd been in New Orleans for a few years and had split and gone to Sherkin Island. And when he came back, he had this lick, and I'd sit in his hand. I was little, but his hand seemed really big, and I watched it. I was mesmerised. To me, it sounded like a cross between an Irish jig or a reel and a Professor Longhair. So I said to him, "Do you mind if I use it?" He said, "No, go ahead." So I put it in a song called Boneyard. That's on the Go-Go Juice record. But just a killing little riff. So funky. Especially Duesenberg.
All right, ready?
Okay, yeah, you got any
Okay.
more?
So
questions?
Masahiro Hanzawa
Hey, Masahiro. Oh, that's my friend in Tokyo. How you doing, man?
says, I've heard you and the gents went to Cuba and played with Cuban musicians. Did you record those sessions, and are you going to release those tracks?
Regrettably, we didn't record those sessions. We had a killer time. I took the Absolute Monster Gentleman to Havana in December, which has been my dream for nearly 30 years, since the first time I went down there. We went down, and then we hooked up with some really fantastic musicians in Havana. Hernan Lopez Nusa, the famous piano player, assembled some musicians, some horn players, percussion, and we did 2 shows, one at the old National Theatre and another one at a little jazz club in Miramar, just outside of Havana. And it was off the chain. It was really great. The musicians had a ball. My guys had never been to Havana before. The Cuban musicians hadn't. One of them had played with some New Orleans musicians. Yosvani Terry, famous musician, horn player. We played at the National Theatre, beautiful old theatre, and it was supposed to be televised for live Cuban TV, but the cameras didn't show up, or the cameraman didn't show up for some reason. That's kind of par for the course down there. So regrettably, it didn't get filmed and didn't get recorded. But my hope is that that we will be able to do that at some point, because that's been my dream project for a long time. That's been a very dear subject of research for me over the years. So hopefully, some point soon, we'll get down and do some recording, the New Orleans Cuba thing.
Okay, well, along those lines, this is a question that somebody posted the other day in anticipation of Quarantini Part 2. He says, one question, I know you were just in Cuba. Could you talk more about how NOLA-style piano playing relates to Afro-Cuban styles? How does some music you heard in Cuba remind you of music you hear in New Orleans?
Okay, that's a good question. That one question could be the subject of several Quarantini casts. But let me see. Well, the piano... Well, first of all, Cuba, specifically Havana and Santiago, and Louisiana have very close historical, geographical, and cultural links. And you just have to look at a map to see where that comes from. They have a shared history, a shared musical history. New Orleans, as Ned Sublette said, represents really the borderline. Canal Street in New Orleans is really the borderline between Catholic Central and South America and Protestant North America. And where we are right here, at Funk headquarters, is in the Creole section of New Orleans. So we're really part of that same hemisphere that is really centered in Cuba. Cuba was the dominant city, biggest city. Haiti too, and the French Caribbean islands. So onto the music. Well, just to talk in brief strokes, otherwise I could be on this one all night long. But the piano style. That kind of thing. That piano style in Cuba, in my opinion, I don't know if there are some experts here who might have more information on this, but that style originally comes from a style from Santiago or Oriente province called son, and they're variations of changui. Son originally was played with a small lineup and with an acoustic guitar which was strummed, and another guitar called a trez, which had 3 pairs of strings that were tuned either in unison or an octave apart, like this. And I have one in the other room, but it's not tuned up, otherwise I could play that and illustrate it to you. But the trez played lines like... when it played it, because the strings were in pairs, it sounds like. And so when son became the rage in Cuba in the 20s and moved into the salons the same way as New Orleans jazz moved into concert halls when it went upriver to St. Louis, places like that, the piano was introduced. Everything got bigger, more horns, bigger sound, and the piano was a loud instrument. And piano players, I think, were informed by what the Trez players had done. And so you start to hear these kind of lines. And that's offset against. And what's interesting to me is one of the little similarities you can spot is that when you play these chords, piano players in New Orleans usually voice a major chord. This is a major chord. This is C major. I'm trying to keep this simple so non-musicians and musicians alike will be able to get something out of this. Here's C major, a major chord, 3 notes. I play it an octave up. And if I take my thumb and play the top note of the chord, if I double it, put it on the bottom as well, so it's at the top and the bottom with these notes in between, then you can play percussively, and that makes that sound really strong. And when it's on the 5th note of the major scale of C, it's very easy to play this, which is called the 6th. And when you get into that, it's got that immediately, you're into a pentatonic mode, which is something that you find in Caribbean music and you find in New Orleans music. You don't really hear it so much in the blues. You hear elements of it in R&B when you listen to like Sam Cooke or Johnny Taylor, people like the way they sing. But it's and also in New Orleans R&B, you hear this again in this riff. And there's Professor Longhair. So if I take Tipatina and play it like Professor Longhair played it, and I'll gradually morph it into more of a traditional son kind of way of phrasing. So. So you can hear, it doesn't take that much of a jump to go from here south to the islands. And anyway, that's a little taste. Like I said, I could go on for hours about that stuff, but I hope that gives you a little bit of a hint.
Okay, 2 quick ones.
Yeah.
So the cat walked into the frame. So
Yeah.
some people are asking, who's the cat?
Well, it's hard. I didn't see the cat, so I don't know which one it is, but we've got one cat who's really thin, it's called Fat. And then we have another cat who's really fat, called Flo.
It was Fats.
Oh, it's Fats. Okay, Fats.
Say hi to Judy. Judy's watching.
Oh, mother-in-law. Hey, Judy, how are you, darling? So a little sip of my quarantinus. Hold on. And Jerry, too, if he's watching as well.
All right, so along that theme, Walker Reynolds says, is Zulu strut kind of in the Cuban theme you're talking about?
Well, it could be, because of course Cuban music is very informed by African stuff. That I don't really know where that came. That's a guitar tune. Oh, let me get the guitar back out again. That was a riff that I came up with years ago in the 80s when I was living in London. It's a harmony. something like that. I think I was kind of influenced by some Nigerian music, some high life. And it was something I messed with and did a little demo on a cassette tape and forgot all about. And then we were making a record called Pin Your Spin for Basin Street Records. And I started playing it, fooling with it. And I think John Porter said, "What's that? Let's cut it." So we did. And I just called it Zulu Strut.
All right. So Barbara Travers says, watching from Seattle, loving this. Wish I had a Layuza's barbecue shrimp po' boy. Thank you for making our night. Cheers. Did you ever get the chance to meet Charles Brown?
I did get the chance to meet Charles Brown. Charles Brown was a blues singer from the West Coast and had a really lovely, soft voice, gorgeous chords. Yeah. He was somebody that Ray Charles was really impressed by. When I was a kid at Christmas parties, Please Come Home for Christmas was always one of the records that came on. So I was familiar with his sound, and I have a couple of records of his on the jukebox upstairs. Yeah, Charles Brown played with Amos Milburn, was a big deal back in the day and influenced a lot of musicians. And one time I was playing on a blues cruise with Taj Mahal and the Phantom Blues Band, and the boat was docked in St. Croix in the Virgin Islands. Charles Brown was on the boat. He was one of the acts on the boat. And there was a festival, a blues festival, and Bonnie Raitt was playing at the festival and flew down. That was the first time I ever did a gig with Bonnie, played with Bonnie. She sat in with the band, and she invited Charles Brown up to play on the song with her. But he was getting kind of old at that point, and it was hard for him to, when called on stage, to kind of walk and negotiate and get around without tripping on all the cables and the monitor speakers and whatever, and then to get back off again. And so he sat, instead of doing that, he just sat next to me through the course of the whole gig until it was his time to play, and I just shuffled over and he played his tunes, and then he would shuffle back. So he sat next to me for the whole gig. And it was lovely because I'd take a solo or whatever, and he would tap me on the shoulder and whisper in my ear. So that was very nice, young man. So it was kind of I was nervous, sitting there actually right next to Charles Brown. My God, the legendary Charles Brown. But he was delightful. He was very nice old man, and he sounded great and played great right up to the end. I saw him a bunch in different places. I saw him one time up in New York with Mark Mancini. We went out to see him. Very sadly missed. But I've been very lucky in my life to have got to meet and play with some of these amazing guys.
Don't we have a picture of that somewhere?
Yeah, there's a picture of me upstairs sitting at the piano with Charles Brown on that gig. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Well,
What's next?
Song requests.
Okay.
Chris Nosley and Missy Erlanger both asked for Smile in a While.
Smile in a While. Okay, this is a song that I wrote when I was down in Brazil one time, playing at the Bourbon Street Club in Sao Paulo. I had a keyboard and a keyboard set up in my hotel room so I could write in the evenings. And I don't know what made me come up with this one, but I saw you. Let me see. It goes. I saw you, oh, when I knew, oh, I want you always, always, right here, baby. my heart. Just a smile once in a lonely while could be so nice to see. Right here, well, right here in my heart. Every now and then, you know, my poor heart, my heart be saying, why don't you take her in your arms? My little body and soul, my body wanna take control. My little body and soul, my body wanna take control. Oh, my body soul, my body wanna take control. Let it please, oh please, oh please, yeah, please, please, please. Little taste of Smile in a while, in a different key.
Okay, and then earlier, Andrew Levy said, "Can you play a Tyrone Davis tune?" And then Bernie Muldoon just asked for "In the Mood."
In the Mood. This tune I learnt. I used to be in Walter Wolfman Washington's band. I used to play with Walter at Dorothy's Medallion Lounge, and I had to. There were no rehearsals. He was the music director for Johnny, a singer from down here called Johnny Adams. And we'd play every weekend at Dorothy's up there on by the Bayou, on Orleans Avenue. And I was kind of thrown in the deep end, and I had a good ear for picking stuff up the first time round, and that's kind of why I got the gig, really, because no one could be bothered to rehearse. So I had to learn all this stuff. And a lot of Walter's tunes were pretty complicated and beautiful chords. And anyway, I heard this tune. We had a gig. I remember it vividly. We played a few gigs, but then we did a gig in City Park for a private party. And he pulled this song out, and I loved it. I just love all those kind of juicy chords. And I found out later it was by Tyrone Davis, but I didn't realize at the time. I thought Walter had written it. It's got these... Come here, baby. No, I wanna make sweet love with you. Honey, sugar, oh, baby. Ain't no telling what I'm gonna do. Ain't that a feeling, baby? I feel a good feeling like I never felt, like I never felt. Love show like ice cream, baby. Honey, my love is gonna make you melt. Oh, yes, it is. And are you? In the mood, oh, babe. And are you? Are you in something like that. Not the best key for me to sing it in right now.
All right. So this is both about the same song from two different people. So Tracy Knowles says, how long had you lived in New Orleans when you wrote Port Street Blues? And then, scrolling. Oh, where'd the
Hold
other
on, I'm just
one
going to
go?
top up my quarantinis.
Oh, I lost it. Where'd it go? And then, where is his name? Jeffrey Starrett says, where did you get the inspiration for the song Port Street Blues?
Interestingly, and perhaps you'll be surprised to hear, I got the inspiration for Port Street Blues from having the blues on Port Street. Well, actually, that's not strictly true. I was having the blues in England dreaming about Port Street, because Port Street is where I'd lived in a funky old building near the Mississippi River that had been a grocery store, and it was called Bird's Grocery. And it was a lovely old house that was falling to pieces, ramshackled. It hadn't seen a coat of paint in about 100 years. And when you looked at it from the street, it looked like you were looking at a sepia black and white photograph. It looked like it was just, it had existed in a previous incarnation of New Orleans. Just very evocative of everything old and sleepy and run down and funky. And I had to take an enforced leave of absence, courtesy of the immigration department at one stage, and was very, very homesick for this house I'd really kind of grown up in. The building's still there. It's on the corner of Charters and Port Street, and I think it's a noodle shop now. But for many years I lived there with my buddy that I grew up with as a kid in school in England, who moved out to New Orleans. He was crazy about music and embraced the New Orleans lifestyle to the full. And we jokingly called it Funk Headquarters, because it was held together by all the record sleeves that we'd nailed to the walls. Seemed like. And I had a studio set up upstairs, and that's where I recorded Port Street Blues when I eventually got back to New Orleans. So Port Street Blues was recorded upstairs at the noodle shop on Port and Charter Street, which formerly was Bird's Grocery, and the nickname for Bird's Grocery was FHQ, Funk Headquarters, which now is the name of this place, transplanted, and the name of my record label too, FHQ. And so, yeah, Port Street Blues is a song all about the house and the joint and the life. Camelback Riverside shack, Creole shotgun with a yard out back, cool breeze and rigolets and blowing through my banana. Hey. Camelback Riverside shack, Creole shotgun, little yard out back, cool breeze and rigolets blowing through my banana trees, y'all, and rusty freight ship drifting in from the ocean far away. Cast long shadows on my back porch, the sad time of day. I'm trying to tell you about a little feeling I can't lose when I'm a long way from home. Yeah, that's when I get the Port Street Blues. When I get back down on Port Street, I'm gonna kick off my shoes, pour me out a fresh one, quarantinist that is, slap on my grocery grooves, calling on the friendly travelers, hear the Wolfman howl the blues. So I'm hanging with the funk captain, y'all, back on Port Street at FHQ. Port Street. That's the only place I find. Yeah, I can rest my worried heart. Yeah, I can rest my worried heart. Yeah, I can rest my worried heart, my worried heart. Pacify my mind. Port Street Blues. That's for Debbie and Alex, if they're listening.
I was just going to say, Deb's just said, yeah, you're
Oh,
right.
really? Go ahead, Debs. Debbie and Alex, my old neighbours next door at Port Street, Funk headquarters.
Let's see. And then...
Fellow Quarantinians and countrymen. Hold on. Let's have a little sip of Quarantinus.
Oh, I can't see it now. But Ade says she's enjoying it. And can you play some facts?
Ide, especially for Ide and the judge. All right. Let me see. The fat man, 'cause I weigh 300 pounds. All the girls, they love me 'cause I know my way around. Yeah, I was standing on the corner of Rampart and Canal, just there watching all them fine young Creole gals. Especially for Ide and the judge. But yeah, Stephen.
All right. And then Jim Doherty says, if you were doing a single and you needed to get people to dance, what one song would you play?
Single meaning a solo
Well,
gig.
I guess the solo gig.
A solo
yeah.
gig. What song would I play to get people to dance? Well, you know, they're all kind of well, not all of them dance tunes, but a lot of them are dance tunes. A lot of R&B, New Orleans R&B tunes, really, I think were the hits were designed for people to be up on the floor. So, well, one that always works is Little Richard. See, I'm not going to do the screaming part. If I was on a gig, I'd be howling that loud, but it ain't going to work right here with this setup we got. But Lucille would be a good one. Pretty much you could take anything from the New Orleans songbook and it would work. Play that in New Orleans, everybody gets up.
All right. Michael Bursky says, any stories about James Booker?
Oh, James Booker, wow, well... He was a character. Well, I was there the night he threw up in the icebox.
Where were you?
At the Maple Leaf Bar. I mean, that's one story. It was, at that time, there was a local band, the Radiators, who were hugely popular, and they would play at the Maple Leaf, and the place would be packed till 6 o'clock in the morning. And so, in advance, it was like a military operation, getting the bar stacked, and getting everything ready for the onslaught that was about to start. And Booker used to hang out at the bar a lot because his manager at the time was John Parsons, who was one of the owners of the bar, still is, I believe, and still drinks at the bar. Nice guy. And he stayed in one of the apartments upstairs. Upstairs on the right was his apartment, on the left was a gun shop, and downstairs at the Maple Leaf was a bar and then a laundromat. So you could launder your dirty drawers, get a gin and tonic, and pick up an Uzi upstairs all in one go if you wanted. That was your thing. And Booker stayed upstairs and was always in the bar. And Booker was a character, you never quite knew what you were going to get with Booker. He could be really nice one time, depending on the cocktail of whatever drugs he'd ingested and how many Canadian whiskies he'd drunk and all that sort of stuff. But this particular night, he was pretty loaded and was the only person, well, there was only about a couple of people sitting at the bar. And there was a flurry of activity, and the thing they had to do was stock the big coolers that ran the length of the bar. And so they'd put ice in, then they carefully arrange all the beers, then they put another layer of ice, then they'd arrange beers, and they'd pretty much just finished it all when Booker went, ugh, and then leaned over and threw up. It was so gross. And so they had to then take everything out, clean everything, and start again. So anyway, it's not a particularly charming Booker story, but most of the Booker anecdotes are to do with sort of misbehavior of one sort or another. But
what year was that, you think, around?
That was 1981, probably. And he played every Tuesday night at the bar, and I had a job at the bar. And as I say, he would often stay upstairs, so he got free drink at the bar, as did I, because I was working there. And so he was just a fixture. And he really, it's a testament to how crazy that place was to say that Booker didn't have, there were so many funny eccentrics in that place at that time that Booker didn't really stand out that much as being particularly weird. Searing indictment of the rest of the regular clientele. But a very colourful bar at that time. Still is a colourful bar. It's my favourite bar in New Orleans. But yeah, I saw him play a lot, and chat to him at the bar, and sometimes he'd be really friendly, and sometimes he'd act like he didn't know you, or sometimes he'd just completely ignore you, ignore everybody. But yeah, you couldn't really, he always wore dark glasses, he had one eye, and wore dark glasses, so he was a kind of an impenetrable. He'd smoke cool cigarettes, and a lot of the stuff he said made little sense. So, as I say, he was just one of many characters at the bar at that time. But he could play the piano, and he was the one guy that I got to hear on a regular basis and see close up.
Ann Gibbs says, can you tell us the story behind 00 Funk?
There's no real story behind it. I was living in the French Quarter on Charter Street, and Big D, the guitar player, Derwin Perkins, in the Monster Gents, came over, and he had a little lick that we'd been playing on. I think we played it on Moonburn. The songs we had in the set would evolve. You know, we'd play these tunes, we'd rehearse and come up with arrangements with little hip details, and then sometimes I'd throw in something, and everybody would go, "Oh yeah!" And so that would sort of, I'd do it again the next gig, and everyone dug it. So that became part of the arrangement. Sometimes we'd try out, or someone would add something, and it didn't really work, so that didn't last. So the songs would sort of, there's a Darwinian process where hip parts of the arrangement stayed, and we dispensed with those things that weren't working so well. And there was one little hip riff that he played at one point where we broke the song down. And he came over one day, and we actually turned that one little riff into a tune. There was an Edwin Starr song back in the day called Agent 00 Soul. New Orleans being about funk, I thought it'd be good to have an Agent 00 Funk, and we kind of built it around a James Bond style chord progression like that. And the guitar riff went. got what you wanted. Baby, I got what you needed. Now if we operate undercover, I could be your secret lover. Agent 005. I got the moves, I got the grooves, and I got the rhymes. I got the tools to operate behind enemy lines. If you're down, I'm around for a thrill. Secret agent with a license to chill. Secret agent with a license to chill. Secret agent with a license to chill. Secret agent with a license to chill now. A secret agent with a license to chill. Agent 00 Funk. Agent 00 Funk. It's me and Big D wrote that one.
All right, here's one that's going to test your memory a little bit.
Okay.
Two-parter from Leo Joseph. He says, what were you looking for in a piano when you ended up with the piano you're playing? What sort of musical and sound qualities did you look for example? And here's where your memory comes in. And in Australia last year, you did a magnificently bluesy Johnny Guitar Watson tune early in a set in Melbourne, and I asked you what it was after the gig, but cannot for the life of me remember what it was. Would you play it for us? And thanks for doing these quarantinis. What do you think it was?
Quarantinuses.
Quarantinus.
All right, first question. The piano. Well, I've always wanted a nice piano. I always had pianos from out of thrift stores and junk shops. And the piano I learnt to play when I was a kid was my grandma's piano, which she bought many, many years ago, and has been the centre of all our family knees-ups and get-togethers for the last 70-odd years. But one day I was in the car out in Kenner, Louisiana, and I stopped into the piano shop there just because I was driving past it and thought I'd just go and have a look. And they had 3 Yamaha pianos in a row. And I've played some Yamaha pianos. I've played lots of them. It's quite a common piano. You find it's a sort of a standard thing you find in studios and lots of gigs. And they had 3 of them, and I went around the whole shop plonking just on all the pianos. And got to the end of the room, there were the 3 Yamahas. I played the first one, yeah. Played the second one, yeah. I played the third one. Oh, wow, this one's a bit special. And I think I like it. I've had it tempered down a little bit. But I really liked it. I think, I'm not quite sure what it is that gives it the quality. I think it's probably hard hammers. But the bottom end was pretty spiky instead of round sounding. And I like that for playing funk. If you're playing like clavinet kind of parts on the piano, even if you're playing like fast Professor Longhair, things like fast stuff in the bottom end, you need to have a fairly spiky, defined sound so it doesn't end up sounding like porridge. Don't get me wrong, I've got nothing against porridge. But I don't want my piano to sound like porridge when I'm playing funk in the left hand. So it was a porridge-free piano, and it just did the trick, and I ended up buying it and splashing out and taking the big leap. And this is the piano that's been on all the last few records. Yeah, I kind of dig it.
What about
the Johnny Guitar, a bluesy Johnny Guitar Watson tune.
Could have been Superman Love.
Well, they're all bluesy. May have been Superman Love, but that's not really so bluesy. Wow. Well, it could be any one of a million Johnny Watson tunes. I love Johnny Guitar Watson. I can't remember. Honestly,
you played it.
Huh?
It would have been one that you played in the set.
Yes, but well, there's one called "Be With Me." Well, it's actually called "Lonely Man's Prayer." He goes. want a girl, but you don't have to look like a picture in a Playboy book. I don't care if she can't fry eggs, and I don't care if she ain't got big legs. I want a little girl with a master's degree in the art of loving, oh, and pleasing me. I want a girl to come on and be with me. Be with me. Oh, be with me in the morning. Be with me.
Yeah, he said that sounds right.
Yeah, it's called Lonely Man's Prayer.
So you want to hear some requests? Few.
Sure.
Sometimes I Wonder, 21st Century.
21st Century.
Brother, I'm Hungry. Lonely, Lonely Nights.
Oh man, there's a whole bunch of them. I can't play all of them.
Line.
21st Century. If you remember earlier on, there was a question about triplets. This is a song written using triplets, based on a riff. The Taj Mahal started playing one day when we were in a rehearsal room. We went. I said to him, "What is that tune? What are you playing? That's beautiful. I love that little lick." He just shrugged his shoulders and said, "Oh, I don't know, it's just something. I've never really done anything with it, but it's a hip little lick." And we were going in the studio a few days later, and the producer, John Porter, thought it'd be good to have some new songs. We were covering some really hip old R&B tunes, but he wanted to hear something that was original. I had to leave the session to go to New Orleans, fly back from Los Angeles to New Orleans for the Jazz Fest. Played my gig at the Jazz Fest. And then I had to get up at the crack of dawn, pack my guitar bag, and say goodbye to my girlfriend at the time and head out to catch the early red-eye flight back for the session that day in the studio in Los Angeles. At the time, I was just traveling all the time, and the wandering minstrel it's an old job description. It's the second oldest profession in the world, really, I think. The wandering minstrel, traveling around playing music. That's what we do. So this was, I guess it was 1999. The 21st century was round the corner. So it's a love song dedicated to the one that you have to say goodbye to every time you hit the road. And the song is called, it's like 21st century gypsies singing Love a Man. I wrote the song on the plane and played it for Taj when we got back in the studio that day. And he said, "Cool, I dig it, let's cut it." So we recorded it. I know it's hard to love a gypsy. Oh, don't worry, baby, 'cause I'll soon be coming home to you. And if I got to steal away, 'cause thief in the night now, baby, it's only 'cause I hate to say that long goodbye to you. and I know there ain't nowhere could ever compare with the comfort of your big breast bed. You see, I got a long, hard road to travel, and only cold, hard, stony ground for this poor boy. This poor boy to rest his weary, weary head. Like a fish out of water, oh, I'm drowning on dry land. If I ain't got a reservation ticket, baby, right here, oh, right here, in the palm of my hand. I'm your 21st century, oh, gypsy, oh, gypsy singing of a man. Century gypsy sing, love a man, oh, love a man. Yes, thank you for all the questions. I think it's come to the end, hasn't it, of our quarantine happy hour and a half.
Yeah.
Happy hour and a half.
Happy hour
Wow.
and 18 and a half minutes.
Oh, wow. Well, fellow quarantinians, who we all are, consigned to our quarters, and how lucky we all are to have music as a great level. I've really enjoyed watching these videos from Italy of people singing from their balconies and playing music. And I bid you good night. Thank you all very much for listening. And I should let you know, I'm thinking of doing, I don't know if anybody's interested in this, I did mention it last time, but leave a message if you think this is a good idea. This, given the new reality now that we're all stuck at home, I think a lot of people, if you're like me, you're thinking, well, perhaps this is the time I should get the watercolors out. I've always said I was going to get back to painting or read all the great novels or paint the bathroom or all the things you've been putting off that I haven't got around to. And one thing is for all those people that have pianos in their houses or keyboards who are always saying, yeah, one of these days I'm going to get round to learning how to play that bloody thing, or play one tune at least. I think this is the time. And so I was talking to my mum today, and I said, I'm going to, you should start playing the piano. She loves music. My cousin Eddie just got a piano. I've got my niece Purdy and Johnny and Finn, my nephews, are all kind of starting to learn the piano. And Johnny, Finn and Purdy were supposed to be coming here next week, visiting from England to come and stay with us, and I was going to be showing them all kinds of piano stuff, and sadly they can't come. So the idea is to do piano lessons for them, but I'm going to put them out so anybody can listen and join in. There's going to be a music lesson and a piano lessons for beginners, people who don't really know anything about music but would like to be able to play at least one or two New Orleans things on the piano. And it's going to start with one finger on one key, and we're going to go from there. I'm not quite sure when I'm going to do it, but keep posted. And let me know if you think that's a good idea. Maybe once a week, once every 5 days, something like that. And to get you up to the point where you can go like this. Maybe. Anyway, it might take a few more less. But really, that's actually pretty simple. It sounds difficult, but I'll show you how to do it if you're up for it, if anybody's interested. Something to do over the next few weeks while we're all doing the quarantinian thing. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us on the Quarantinus happy hour. Once again, the recipe for this is very simple. Take 1 bottle martini glass, bottle of Guinness, and a little wedge of potato on the side. There you go. A quarantinus. See you all next time. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
And thanks to our friend Mike Dorsey for helping us with this.